I'm very pleased to be here on My Magical Thing with Patricia MacCormack, occult practitioner, professor of continental philosophy, with particular interests in areas including queer theory, film, activism, and chaos magic. Patricia, it's lovely to have you here.
It's wonderful to be here. I love your segments, the show. I think it's really amazing, and I'm in effulgent company, so I'm even more pleased about that. So thank you for having me, Julian.
You're very welcome, my friend. So, Patricia, may we see your magical thing?
So I'm going to just proviso very briefly and say that I'm quite private about my practice. And so what I am going to show you, which is my magical thing, I'm just going to reach down here where all of them live, the whole collection. My magical thing is man, myth, and magic. And the reason man, myth, and magic is my magical thing is because I went to Catholic school. I was taught by nuns. I got taught classics by nuns. And as you can imagine, I was not a sporty child. I was quite a bookish child. And for whatever reason, in our library, we were not allowed things like Judy Blume books. We were not allowed books that mentioned things like menstruation or early sexuality. And yet my school's library had every single one of these. And so I actually was exposed to the occult at my earliest age at my Catholic high school in Melbourne, Australia library. And I read every single one of these front to back at lunchtimes. I had never heard of occultism. I had never heard of anything like that. And I was initially enchanted because there were pictures of Christopher Lee, and I've always loved horror films since I first saw Taste the Blood of Dracula when I was about 7 years old, which is also quite an occult film. And also I started reading, and I discovered Sister Sabili, who was a Thelemite, the very famous picture of Sister Sabili as the Thelemite. And I discovered that she was from Tasmania. And I thought, wow, I could get out of here and I could get into this stuff. So for that reason, this entire, and I do have all of them down here, but I'm just showing you the one with the index, so it's got everything in it. But I absolutely immersed myself in these without any capacity for discrimination. So all I knew about was horror films, and I was raised Catholic, but I was an atheist from as long as I can remember being able to be critical. And I simply found this unbelievable world unraveling before me where, you know, Tibetan death magic sat side by side with Crowley, sat side by side with occult films and with Madame Blavatsky, and just, it was like this endless unfurling of beautiful and enchanting knowledge that I couldn't believe existed. And for me, it was very interesting because this was vindicated by my very strict upbringing and education at the high school. So there was never any sense of the clandestine or the forbidden in this knowledge. This was valid knowledge. Since then, I have been really interested to talk to people, especially British people, because I found out that this was sold in Boots, and you get your little, you know, your weekly, it was kind of a Ponzi scheme. It's for a Ponzi scheme encyclopedia, it is just phenomenal. And somebody recently sent me an ad for it being advertised in Walgreens. So I'm fascinated at this point as to, you know, which nuns were subscribing to this at my high school. And that is why this is my magical thing, because this is all of my magical things. This is everything I ever learned. Now, clearly this predates chaos magic, and it predated me, in fact. But what I really think is especially amazing about it is that it's accessible. It is really enormously encompassing. It doesn't have any kind of tone of morality. And it was just sitting there, and it looked like no one had touched it for years and years and years until I came along. And when I emigrated to England in the first few years, I finally found the whole set on eBay.
Wow.
And got my 7 volumes, and I love them as objects as well as informations. I reread the entire encyclopedia because I hadn't actually seen or touched one. You get the occasional one at the secondhand bookshops, but you don't get the whole oeuvre. And so both as objects and as an entrance into the occult, these are incredibly meaningful to me, even though I guess many of your listeners might think that they are quite rudimentary or introductory. And they say a lot to me about the Britishness of occulture and occultism, because there's something so earnest and yet simultaneously accessible in them that as a 15-year-old, I couldn't stop reading them. I looked forward to lunchtime. I would sit in the library like the nerd I was, and I would go through them. So these are my magical things.
Patricia, that's amazing. And I completely understand, as someone who was raised on 1970s British occult coffee table books from various presses, with all of that panoply of the broad sweep through the tradition, like you're saying, everything from kind of folk magic to stuff from, like, you know, other cultural settings, and then kind of contemporary, you know, ceremonial magic, post-medieval kind of grimoire magic, all of that kind of stuff. Would you mind opening one of the books and just showing us a couple of pages? Would that be okay? Is that a doable thing?
Here's the entrance. Funnily enough, on one side you have Australia, and on the other side you have magic and mysticism with the beautiful Blake. So that's just a random opening. And also, they smell fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. And that's a really good, nice example of how this kind of like this curation of all the available esoteric options you could conceivably think of are all placed together in these volumes.
It's non-hierarchical, it's non-colonial. It's obviously there are problems with how to speak about the magic of others, but we all grapple with those problems daily. So it just has this wonderful incantation of magic as a worldview, even though it is highly specific. And for me, that was something. I never felt like there was the right or wrong magic to look into. I never felt it was quite a really bricolage experience, because I was able to take bits and pieces from everywhere, which I think as magicians we do. As occultists, we are required to, because we are de-hierarchizing the world, especially if we practice the kind of magic that I do that doesn't covet the leader and the guru. So,
Patricia MacCormack, thank you so much for sharing that profound and accessible entry point to the wonderful and diverse world of the occult that is and was Man, Myth and Magic. Thank you so much, my friend. It's really appreciated.
You are very welcome. And if nothing else, it shows that everyone can practice occultism, because everyone, if you have anything at your fingertips, then you can do it.
It's true. Thanks so much. See you soon.
You're very welcome.